I am never going to go on any kind of birth control again for the rest of my life. It's been a couple of years since my last women's health update. I feel like there's so many things that I've learned in the last 4 years of being a woman that I wish my younger self would have known. Like, I wish I had somebody tell me these things about periods and birth controls and things that we just accept as being like casually normal that women go through, but sometimes it's not normal. I have been on so many different kinds of birth. I feel like I've been on every kind of birth control. And honestly, I've never had a perfect experience with any of them. I just kind of wanted to do a little recap of the things that I've tried in the past, my experience with them, and sort of give you a little bit of an idea of where I am now and what I want to do going forward with my health. I did do a video that I posted 2 years ago talking about my experience with IUDs. That was the last official form of birth control that I was on. Long story short, it got embedded twice. And that was a very traumatic experience. So I will leave a link to the whole video if you want to check that out up here. So let's rewind. Basically, the first time I ever got in birth control, I was actually in high school. And it wasn't because I was like getting sexually active or anything. It was actually because I had really bad acne. And I had just casually heard people saying that if you go on birth control, it can fix your acne. When I went into the doctor, I just kind of like asked about it. And they were like, well, do you get worse zits during your period? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay, we'll put you on birth control. And I was like, okay. I mean, it was just that quick, that easy. Literally, those were the only questions I was given. And I was like, okay, sure, we'll go on the birth control. They also put me on antibiotics to help with my skin. They put me on several different medications. The antibiotics actually make the birth control part of the birth control ineffective anyway. So I was just taking a lot of medication, kind of for, I don't want to say for no reason. It was for a reason. You know, I think that there are some people where managing their hormones with birth controls can actually help their skin. However, looking back, I just don't know if it's like worth the consequences. That being said, I stayed on birth control for many, many years. I got married quite young. I was like 23 years old. So at that point, I didn't want to get a baby. And so I just stayed on birth control while not being on the antibiotics anymore. After a few years, it kind of occurred to me, I feel a little brain foggy. I just feel a little like not fully myself. I'm a creative person. A lot of my work has been creative, and I just felt I was like a little dulled. Plus, when it did come to my body and being married and everything, I also felt like I was having low libido issues. I don't love talking about this, obviously it's not really easy to, but since it was several years ago and I was like in my early 20s, there shouldn't have been any reason for me to have a low libido at that point. It really felt like it had to do with the birth control. So I tried a few different kinds, and the hard part is that because I was also struggling with my skin so much, certain ones would make my skin go crazy, certain ones would just make me feel awful. I tried a few different types of the pill. I think that the pill that worked for me the best was Yaz, which is like a lower level of hormones. One that I tried that was really bad for me was NuvaRing, which is actually a hormone with rings that you place internally. I mean, not to be too explicit, but that dried me out completely and made everything with my partner feel painful. Let me just say that. It was not a good experience for me. And physically, I just like did not want to even hold hands. It affected, I feel like, my ability to be more loving and compassionate, which is so opposite of my natural nature. So I think that that's just kind of a good indication of how dramatically these hormones that we take very casually, very on a whim, very, if you're 16 years old and you're like, I have bad skin, then they just put you on birth control, how dramatically this can affect even your entire personality. I was also never someone who had like really big mood swings before I was on birth control. When I had my periods, you couldn't even tell because mood-wise, I would kind of act the same whether I was on my period or not. But it wasn't until I got on birth control that I started to really have extreme like cyclical reactions with my mood swings. Fast forward a few years, when I wanted to get pregnant, I stopped birth control. That really wasn't an issue. As soon as I stopped, within a couple months we got pregnant. So obviously I wasn't on birth control during that, and then also also while I was breastfeeding. I didn't have a period for maybe another 6 months after I gave birth. When my period came back though, it was like, not to be overly TMI, but it was a bloody mess. I would wear like the biggest maxi tampon with the biggest maxi pad, and I would still manage to leak in like 2 hours. I didn't really want to talk about this point because I was such an advocate for menstrual cups before I had kids, but after I had my daughter, I tried using the larger menstrual cup size for women who have already had a baby. It's like literally a bigger sized cup. Maybe it'll be pretty similar to what I did before, which before I could just wear my menstrual cup for like 14 hours, like all day. It would just be fine, not leak, not have any issues. This one, I was overflowing the bigger size cup every 2 hours. And it was kind of to the point where I didn't even want to leave the house because it was very risky. Like I would just always be afraid during my period that I was going to bleed everywhere. And also thinking back, I feel like I was a little concerned that I was getting anemic because of the massive amounts of blood loss. I was also having really bad cramps, and my periods were lasting about 9 days. And if you think about out of a whole month, 9 days of that being an extremely heavy period, that's a significant amount of your life if you're kind of tied down to staying at home and not being able to do anything because you're fearful of bleeding everywhere. I know I'm not the only one who's experienced this, so if you have also experienced this, please feel free to share your experience in the comments because I just felt trapped by my period. It was a very frustrating experience. When I got pregnant with my son, my second born, I didn't have a period again, which let me say, that's one of the nicest things about being pregnant is you don't have a period that whole time. But after I went through the horrible periods with Arya, I was really concerned that that was going to happen again after Ezra. And so I wanted to be really proactive. I've heard that the hardest part of getting an IUD is getting it placed. That can be the most painful part, but they can put it in right when you give birth. So I tried that right after I had them. They literally put an IUD in there right there while everything is still kind of open, gaping wound, healing, and it was all good until I got a check and they found that it was embedded and I had to have it removed, and so I had another one put in. It embedded another couple years down the line when I felt like I was having weird periods come back again. And at that point my doctor was like, yeah, we're not going to do this. If you get another IUD placed, it's probably going to have the same thing happen. And I was honestly kind of devastated because that was the most normal I had felt in my body since before I was ever on birth control. It solved the problem of the crazy heavy periods after having a baby. It solved the problem of like not being worried about skipping birth control pills, and I didn't feel it. But if my body is kind of rejecting it, it's like I felt so trapped once again. As you guys know, I try to be really intentional about the choices that I make because taking care of my health now is going to help me do the things that I love for much longer, especially with how hard it is as a woman to be heard a lot of times when you go to the doctors. It made me extra interested in trying out Midi Health, which is the leading virtual care clinic for menopause and perimenopause. They now offer longevity care for women of all ages. I'm actually so excited for Midi to be sponsoring this portion of the video because were they literally reading my mind? I have been talking about this very topic with my girlfriends, like literally within the last couple of weeks. I've specifically been having a lot of questions about my bone density as well as my skin and hair. It was super easy to book my age-well visit, and after talking with the Midi clinician, it was a virtual visit, literally just on the phone. She actually recommended specific supplements I could take, like calcium with extra vitamin K for absorption and also vitamin D, as well as recommending doing weighted exercises. There were also some screenings that she recommended, and I also really like that she took a very preventative approach because that's very much in line with how I like to stay healthy. I also asked her about specific screenings like hormonal screenings, and she gave me her recommendations, and if there was anything that I asked specifically about, she was always kind of open-minded about giving me the option to do those while also telling me what she thinks is appropriate for me and my health and what she recommended. It was never like, oh, she's just shutting me down. After my visit, I received a recap and a personalized plan, which I really appreciate because I don't always remember everything from my visit. So if you're looking for personalized, customized care, which is covered by insurance, then click my link to book your first Midi visit. Okay, now for the follow-up of where I am now. I am not on any birth control. I know. No big surprise there. I have not been on any kind of IUD since I last had it removed a couple years ago. I was really nervous about it because I thought if I got off the IUD, it would be back to the situation after I had my daughter where the periods would be crazy again. And I didn't want to be stuck in that situation where so much of my life was locked down to my period. And I promised you guys I would give you this update. I am so happy to report that I actually have the lightest periods now that I've had in my entire life. I might have super mild cramps on the first day of my period, if at all. Half the time I have no cramps whatsoever, which before, especially in my college years, my teenage years, my cramps would be debilitating. Like, I would not be able to leave bed. I couldn't focus if I went to class. Like, I would be bent over double. It would be so painful and last for several days. I think there was a part of me at the time that's like, oh, well, this friend or my sister or whoever, they have it so bad that they'll puke their guts out and have to go to the ER. And if I'm not at that level, then it's not that bad. I would just minimize my own pain and suffering. But no, it was really bad. I think that women's health shouldn't be a comparison game. I think that one of the things I learned as I got older was to listen to myself and validate my own feelings when it comes to my health. And if I'm in pain, I don't have to be in pain. If I'm uncomfortable, if there's something off in my body, then I need to listen to myself because nobody else is living in your body except you. Nobody knows your experiences unless you vocalize it, tell somebody, advocate for yourself, and do something about it. And I think that's one of the hardest struggles that I have when it comes to birth control. I feel like 9 out of 10 times, all of the doctors, even some other women in your life, they might normalize it because they also went through difficulties, and in our women brains we're just like, oh, but if we all go through this suffering then it's normal. But is it really normal to take a pill to modify the hormones in our entire bodies for several years? I thought it was for a time, and now looking back, I don't think so. And having a daughter myself now, when she gets older, it's not something I'm going to recommend to her either. So yeah, now where my periods used to last for 8 or 9 days, they last about 5 days start to finish now. The quantity is much more manageable. I can usually get away with just like a normal regular tampon to a super on my first couple of days with just some period underwear. And sorry if that's TMI, but that's what I use. It's what works for me. I feel like I'm just now getting back to the point where I'm feeling like I want to start trying to get back into like menstrual cups and everything again. I was so put off by when I had so much period blood it couldn't be managed by the menstrual cup, but I feel like now I think I'm back to the point where I want to try that out again, which if you want to see a whole video about menstrual cups, that is something that I've posted in the past. I will link it up there for you guys to check out. And I think the biggest thing about not being on any hormones anymore is I feel like my brain belongs to me. I don't feel that brain fog. Well, okay, being a mom of 2, I feel the brain fog, but it's not because I'm putting hormones in my body. It's not because I have some other thing that's trying to trick my body into thinking it's pregnant or in a different state of being than it just naturally is. I felt so much better about myself. I'm not having the kind of like weight fluctuations I also had when being on different birth controls. I just feel a lot more myself, and I feel like that's really important. That's important for us to tell each other and talk about and reflect on ourselves about, instead of just doing things because everybody else is doing it and thinking that that's normal. Just thinking back on my whole journey, I kind of wish somebody would have said you don't have to go on birth control just because your skin is messed up. I think think there are other avenues that are much better if you have acne, if you have, difficulties. I much would rather recommend retinol. I am still on retinol. I think it does great things for my skin. I still get breakouts, even at this age. I never have not gotten breakouts. I've never not struggled with my skin, but I feel like that's much more manageable than being on something that has to process through my entire body. And in terms of preventing pregnancy, I am a much, much, much bigger fan of using physical barriers like condoms, or if you have a lifelong partner that you've had this discussion with and you both would like to make that kind of decision, I think that vasectomies are also a really fantastic option. Especially in my case, I have two amazing children and I feel very completed and whole with my family being the way it is. My husband Ben decided to get a vasectomy about a year ago, and it has been one of the most positive things I think that we've done for our relationship. Just the mental freedom it gave me and not having the burden be on myself. I mean, I feel like I've sacrificed quite a lot from my own body and having our kids and everything. And so it's just made a really big improvement to, I think, both of our mental health, our physical wellness, and we've just both been very, very pleased with making that decision together. So to all the people in my past video who said, your husband needs to get a vasectomy, first of all, I'm on that camp. I am 100% in that train, and if you're questioning it, if your husband's questioning it, this is your sign that it has a 2 thumbs up from our household. Very minimal negative consequences whatsoever, and yeah, it's been great. So I guess that is it for my recap. It's been a really positive video, and I know that makes it a little bit maybe less exciting to watch me say that just leaving it behind has been the best option for me, but I just wish I had known this before I started in the beginning. So for those of you who have young daughters, if you are a young person and you're struggling with it or trying to make decisions about family planning, I hope this gives a little bit of insight into the sort of pros and cons of birth control and yeah, my decision to step away from all of those things. So I guess that is about it. Thank you guys so much for letting me just like yap about some TMI topics. If there's anything else you want me to discuss or have questions about when it comes to women's health, like, I've been starting to talk with my daughter about like, Oma has periods and these are the things that I use for my periods. She's like 8, almost 9, and I just want to like mentally prep her for the future. But yeah, I never had these kind of discussions with my mom, so I hope this is giving you encouragement to just be more open-minded about discussing women's health. And if you have any questions for me, then leave it in the comments. I love you guys. Feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!